Some stories refuse to tie up with a happy ending, leaving you haunted by films where the wicked walk away completely triumphant. Welcome back to Screen Curator, as we count down 15 unforgettable movies where evil gets the absolute last word. We kick off our descent into cinematic darkness with C7N, a film that doesn't just invite you into the shadows, it drenches you in them. David Fincher's masterwork drags us into a nameless, perpetually rain-slicked metropolis where moral decay has practically seeped into the concrete. Here, a weary homicide veteran on the verge of retirement is paired with an idealistic, hot-headed rookie to hunt down a biblical serial killer. What makes this thriller an absolute titan of the genre is its breathtaking visual claustrophobia. Fincher and his cinematographer utilized a rare silver retention chemical process on the physical film strip, crushing the blacks and stripping the world of warmth. You can practically feel the damp chill of the crime scenes, each meticulously staged around the 7 deadly sins. It is a psychological gauntlet where every clue feels like a step deeper into a trap. We watch not just for the thrill of the chase, but to see if human decency can survive an adversary who treats horror as high art. If you crave stories that refuse to pull their punches and leave you staring at the screen in stunned silence, this masterpiece of dread demands your attention. Sliding into our number 14 spot is Chinatown, a sun-drenched nightmare of municipal corruption and personal rot. Forget the rain-slicked, shadow-heavy alleyways of traditional noir. 1930s Los Angeles is drowned here in an oppressive, dusty heat wave where water is more valuable than gold. Jack Nicholson stars as J.J. Giddits, a slick, cynical private investigator who gets hired for what seems like a run-of-the-mill marital dispute, only to find himself dragged into a vast conspiracy of engineered drought and stolen land. Giddits is instantly out of his depth, literally marked by a slashed nose that keeps him bandaged for most of the running time, as he collides with the terrifyingly polite, monstrously powerful patriarch Noah Cross, played with bone-chilling charm by John Huston. Jerry Goldsmith's melancholic, trumpet-led score, famously written and recorded in just 10 days, hangs over every frame like heavy smog. Chinatown is the ultimate cinematic warning that some systems are too vast and some men too rich to ever face justice. For anyone who craves a gripping, atmospheric mystery where the rot runs all the way to the top, this masterpiece remains an absolutely essential haunting experience. Sliding into spot 13 is the ultimate masterclass in cinematic deception, The Usual Suspects. The story begins with a petty police lineup of 5 career criminals, but quickly spirals into a blood-soaked harbor massacre, leaving only 2 survivors. One of them is Roger Verbal Kint, a fragile con artist with a severe physical disability who was hauled into a cramped, messy office to tell an arrogant customs agent how they were all blackmailed by a mythical, terrifying crime lord named Keyser Soze. What makes this ride so intoxicating is how it weaponizes subjective storytelling. Every frame is loaded with grit and character, from Benicio del Toro's bizarre, completely garbled dialogue as the doomed gangster Fenster, to the sweaty, high-stakes power play happening across a cluttered desk. You are placed directly in the investigator's shoes, desperately trying to separate myth from reality. As the law tries to bully the truth out of their weak witness, the film builds a towering legend around a villain who operates like a ghost. It is a brilliant puzzle box thriller where the ultimate victory is won not with bullets, but with the quiet power of a beautifully spun lie. Sitting at number 12 on our list of triumphant malice is No Country for Old Men, a modern masterpiece that strips away the comforting myth of cosmic justice. When Llewellyn Moss stumbles upon a botched drug deal in the desert and takes a suitcase containing $2 million, he unwittingly invites a force of pure, chaotic inevitability into his life. That force is Anton Chigurh, a psychopathic hitman who operates less like a man and more like an elemental plague, deciding human lives on the casual flip of a coin. What makes this chase so devastatingly tense is the absolute absence of a traditional musical score. Instead, the Coen brothers force you to sit in a suffocating silence, hyper-focusing on the pneumatic hiss of Chigurh's captive bolt pistol and the crunch of gravel under boots. We watch alongside a weary Sheriff Bell as he realizes he is entirely outmatched by a new, incomprehensible wave of absolute evil. It is a brilliant, sun-scorched nightmare of West Texas, proving that sometimes the universe does not reward the brave and the bad man simply walks away. Coming in at number 11 is Michael Haneke's chilling masterpiece, Funny Games. What begins as an idyllic lakeside vacation for a quiet family devolves into a waking nightmare when 2 polite, white-gloved young men knock on the door under the innocent guise of borrowing some eggs. It is a deceptively mundane setup, but Haneke uses this polite intrusion to completely shatter the sanctity of the home, trapping the family in a sadistic, inescapable game of psychological terror. What makes this film an absolute must-watch for fans of high-tension cinema is how it weaponizes the very act of viewing. These clean-cut tormentors do not just terrorize their captives, they look directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall to mock your expectations and make you an accomplice to their cruelty. It is a brilliant confrontational experience that strips away the comforting cliches of typical home invasion thrillers. If you want a film that respects your intelligence by utterly defying conventional survival tropes, this is a masterclass in pure atmospheric dread that will hold you hostage from its first polite knock to its final devastating frame. Coming in at number 10 on our list is Roman Polanski's masterpiece of urban paranoia, Rosemary's Baby. Instead of a shadowy Gothic castle, the nightmare here unfolds inside a sun-drenched, prestigious Manhattan apartment building. Mia Farrow stars as a young wife who moves into the Bramford with her ambitious actor husband, only to find themselves smothered by the eccentric, overly attentive elderly couple next door. The horror of this film doesn't rely on cheap jump scares, but on the agonizing, slow-burn isolation of a woman being systematically gaslit by the very people sworn to protect her. After a bizarre drug-fueled night, Rosemary becomes pregnant, but her journey into motherhood curdles into a physical nightmare of unexplained pain, forced herbal drinks, and a creeping realization that her body is no longer her own. To capture Rosemary's fraying sanity, Polanski famously had Farrow walk directly into real live New York traffic. It is a masterclass in claustrophobic dread, building a trap so meticulously engineered that when the final trapdoor snaps shut, the triumph of evil feels both utterly devastating and dreadfully intimate. Sliding into our number 9 spot is the 1973 folk horror masterpiece, The Wicker Man. Here we follow Sergeant Neil Howie, a deeply devout, rigid Christian police officer who flies a seaplane to the remote Scottish island of Summerisle to investigate a young girl's disappearance. Instead of a standard missing person case, he is met with a sun-drenched, smiling community that openly practices ancient Celtic paganism, led by the endlessly charismatic Lord Summerisle, played with majestic elegance by Christopher Lee. What makes this film an essential watch is how it subverts the typical horror dynamic. There are no dark corridors or masked killers. Instead, the dread festering on Summerisle is bathed in bright daylight, joyful folk songs, and provocative fertility dances. The film plays almost like an unsettling musical, where the cheerful melodies only heighten the creeping sense of doom. Howie's self-righteous anger and moral rigidity blind him to the reality of the island, turning his investigation into a meticulously laid trap. If you crave a psychological thriller, where the true terror comes from the absolute, unwavering conviction of an entire community, this is your ultimate destination. The final realization of how hopelessly outmatched reason is against fanaticism is one of the most chilling, inescapable climaxes in cinematic history. Coming in at number 8 on our list is the criminally underrated 1990s thriller Arlington Road. Jeff Bridges stars as Michael Faraday, a widowed history professor teaching the history of domestic terrorism who rescues his neighbor's injured son from the middle of the street. This single act of kindness introduces him to the seemingly perfect family next door, played with deeply unsettling, folksy charm by Tim Robbins and Joan Cusack. But as Michael notices strange inconsistencies in their history, his curiosity morphs into an obsessive crusade. Director Mark Pellington brilliantly weaponizes suburban complacency, using tight, off-kilter framing to evoke a suffocating sense of paranoia. We watch Michael navigate a labyrinth of architectural blueprints, shifting backstories and half-whispered lies, desperate to find out if he is losing his mind to grief or uncovering a massive terrorist plot. Arlington Road does not offer the neat, comforting resolutions of typical Hollywood thrillers. Instead, it traps you in a slow-burn nightmare where the threat is already inside the house, and the chilling realization of how easily a normal life can be weaponized will linger long after the screen goes dark. Coming in at number 7 is Nightcrawler, a sleek, deeply unsettling neo-noir that transforms the sunny streets of Los Angeles into a predatory playground. We follow Lou Bloom, played with a chilling, hollow-eyed intensity by a gaunt Jake Gyllenhaal, a desperate scavenger who pawns a stolen bicycle for a cheap police scanner and a camcorder. Lou finds his calling in the cutthroat world of freelance crime journalism, chasing sirens through the neon-drenched night to sell raw, bloody footage to local morning news stations. What makes this film an absolute masterpiece of tension is how it weaponizes modern hustle culture. Lou is not a monster hiding in the shadows. He is a hyper-articulate sociopath who speaks entirely in the sterile, robotic platitudes of corporate self-help seminars. He realizes that in the media, fear is the ultimate commodity, and if it bleeds, it leads. As Lou begins crossing lines, manipulating actual crime scenes to frame his shots, the film ratchets up a breathless kinetic momentum. It is a pitch-black, mesmerizing ride for anyone who loves psychological thrillers where the most dangerous predator on the street is the one holding the camera. Sliding into our number 6 spot is a low-budget masterpiece that revolutionized modern horror, the original James Wan thriller Saw. Long before it became a sprawling, trap-heavy franchise, this was a lean, agonizingly tense psychological puzzle box. We wake up with 2 men chained to opposite corners of a decaying subterranean restroom with a bloody corpse lying between them on the cold tile. They have a microcassette player, a couple of tapes, and 2 dull hacksaws that aren't strong enough to cut through iron chains only through their own ankles. What makes this film an absolute essential is how it weaponizes hope. The jigsaw killer doesn't actually pull any triggers. Instead, he constructs a scenario where the victim's own desperation becomes their undoing. It is a grimy, sweat-slick descent into panic, shot on a shoestring budget over just 18 days that functions as a flawless trap for the audience. By the time the industrial gears grind to a halt and that final chilling phrase is uttered, you realize the villain didn't just win. He had the game rigged from the very first second. Coming in at number 5 on our countdown is the 1996 legal thriller Primal Fear. Here we follow Martin Vale, a sleek, arrogant Chicago defense attorney who cares far more about cameras and headlines than actual justice. He takes the pro bono case of Aaron Stampler, a stuttering, terrifyingly fragile altar boy caught covered in blood after the savage murder of a prominent archbishop. Edward Norton, in a mind-blowing feature film debut, plays Aaron with a shivering, wide-eyed vulnerability that makes you instantly want to protect him. The narrative operates as an electric psychological trap. Vale believes he is playing savior to an innocent kid, constructing a defense around a fractured mind and a violent alter ego named Roy. But what makes this ride so unforgettable is how it weaponizes the lawyer's own ego against him. It is a high-stakes chess match where the board itself is rigged from the very first move. You will watch Vale's smug confidence slowly erode, culminating in a final chilling realization that proves some monsters don't need to hide in the dark. They just need an audience. It is an absolute must-watch for anyone who loves their thrillers pitch black. At number 4, we arrive at Richard Donner's masterpiece of high society dread, The Omen. This is not a film of dark Gothic castles. It is a terrifyingly clean, brightly lit descent into absolute corruption, set against the backdrop of wealthy diplomats and manicured English estates. Gregory Peck stars as Robert Thorne, an American ambassador who secretly adopts an orphan newborn to spare his grieving wife the pain of their own child's stillbirth. But as young Damien grows, a sequence of bizarre, violent tragedies begins to prune the family tree, eliminating anyone who dares to look too closely at the boy. What makes this ride so uniquely chilling is the grounded realism. Photographed with a crisp, naturalistic elegance, the horror feels alarmingly close to our world, underpinned by Jerry Goldsmith's Oscar-winning chanting score that sounds like a black mass invading a cathedral. It's a slow, escalating nightmare about the absolute helplessness of human power. You watch it not just for the iconic creative deaths, but for the agonizing psychological weight of a father realizing that the child he loves is a vessel for the end of days, and that the devil's greatest trick is using our own institutions to protect his heir. Taking the number 3 spot on our countdown is Terry Gilliam's 1985 masterpiece, Brazil. Here, the ultimate antagonist isn't a singular maniacal mastermind, but the suffocating, soul-crushing weight of state bureaucracy itself. The story kicks off with a terrifyingly mundane error, a literal bug in the system, a dead fly that jams a government printer, swapping the name of a suspected terrorist with an innocent shoe repairman named Buttle. Enter Sam Lowry, a low-level clerk who spends his days daydreaming of winged armor and sky-high escapes, who is tasked with correcting the paperwork. But as Sam tries to navigate a retro-futuristic city choked by exposed, snaking pneumatic pipes and decaying high-rises, his quest for a woman who matches his dreams puts him directly in the crosshairs of the Ministry of Information. What makes this ride so unforgettable is how Gilliam weaponizes absurdity, set to the hauntingly cheerful refrain of its title song. It is a visually staggering, darkly comic nightmare where the machinery of the state doesn't just defeat the hero, it swallows his very sanity. For anyone who craves cinema that is as visually audacious as it is emotionally devastating, this dystopian fever dream is an absolute triumph that will linger in your mind long after the screen goes dark. Sliding into our penultimate spot is the humid, sweat-drenched Southern Gothic nightmare, The Skeleton Key. Set deep within the brackish, moss-draped bayous of Louisiana, the film follows Caroline, a cynical hospice nurse who takes a job at a decaying plantation house to care for a stroke victim trapped in silent terror. Equipped with a skeleton key that unlocks every door, she inevitably ventures into a hidden attic, uncovering a treasure trove of hoodoo artifacts. What makes this thriller so skin-crawlingly effective is how it weaponizes the very concept of skepticism. As Caroline tries to protect her mute patient from what she believes is psychological abuse, she is slowly lured into a trap where disbelief is her only shield, and curiosity is her executioner. The film builds tension not through cheap jump scares, but through the suffocating atmosphere of the swamp, the scratch of dusty record players, and the agonizing realization that some doors are locked for a reason. It is a rare, devastating masterclass in narrative trap setting, delivering a climax that pulls the rug out so cleanly, you will immediately want to watch it again to see how the snare was laid. At the absolute summit of our list is 1984, a cinematic masterpiece that doesn't just depict defeat, but systematically extinguishes the very concept of human hope. Shot by cinematographer Roger Deakins using a bleak, silver-heavy bleach bypass process, the film plunges you into a decaying, soot-stained London where even thoughts are treason. We follow John Hurt's fragile, hollow-cheeked Winston Smith as he dares to commit the ultimate crime, keeping a secret diary and falling in love. But this is not a story of triumphant rebellion. Opposite him is Richard Burton in his final chillingly calm performance as O'Brien, an inquisitor who doesn't want to destroy Winston, but to rewrite his soul. The terrifying climax in Room 101 is the ultimate realization of our list's theme. It is a masterclass in psychological dread that forces you to witness the total systematic eradication of a man's free will. If you want a film that dares to go to the absolute edge of darkness, where the villain doesn't just win a physical battle but claims total, permanent victory over the human spirit, this is the crowning achievement of dystopian cinema. Because sitting back and watching John Doe or Chigurh get away scot-free leaves a very specific kind of psychological itch. If you need to scratch it, watch these 20 psychological thrillers that completely break your brain right now.